I remember the morning sky was tinted pale gold when I eased out of Cat Harbor. The sun, still low, sent long rays across the calm surface of the water. It was September, the big south swell had arrived like clockwork, and I was itching to get a taste of it. I was alone. I've always been a solitary traveler, especially when I'm chasing waves I shouldn't be chasing. My boat, a 36-foot Ed Monk-designed rough water, bobbed gently on the mooring line. The smell of coffee I'd brewed earlier lingered in the cabin. 2 boards strapped down, extra fuel in jerry cans, emergency flares, a marine radio, and GPS, though it was old and finicky, were all accounted for. By midday, I hoped to be carving into waves off the remote breaks near San Clemente Island. The largest south swell of the season waited for me there. I took a final look back at the protective embrace of Cat Harbor on Catalina's backside. I'd left a small note pinned up at the harbor master's shack. Heading to SC Island, back by sunset. Not official, not even required, but I wanted someone, anyone, to know where I'd gone, just in case. The old-timers on Catalina always say, "You never know what you'll find out there." The diesel engine rattled to life. I eased forward, passing the other moored boats, sport fishers, sailboats, a few other cruisers. Mine was the only one setting off alone so early. Once beyond the reef, I nosed into the channel, heading southeast. The ocean out there was still glassy, a miracle of calm before the wind kicked up later in the day. My boat drew steady lines through the gentle swells. I must have been 2 hours out when I took stock of my position. San Clemente Island was still a grayish smudge on the horizon, maybe 12 miles off. The swell was building, long and rolling, and I could feel the anticipation bubbling inside me. I'd been chasing big waves for years, but these offshore island waves could be magic, the kind that break clean, hollow, and empty. No other surfers for miles. I checked my GPS, a moody device that didn't always play nice, but it seemed to confirm my heading. I sipped some water and tried the VHF radio. Just static. Perhaps I was in a low spot. "Come on," I said quietly, tapping the radio. No response. Not that I needed it, but it would have been nice to know the conditions on the far side of San Clemente. I shrugged it off. The sea was my guide. I could read the sky, the swell direction. Today looked perfect. I throttled up slightly. The rough water responded with a deep hum. Built in the 60s, she was sturdy, a real tank of a boat, her hull made to cut through chop without hesitation. Some part of me was proud to be piloting a classic. In the distance, a pod of dolphins soared out of the water, arcing in playful unison. A good omen, I thought. The day's going to be epic. Then, out of nowhere, I sensed a presence. It's strange how the ocean can make you feel like you're never truly alone. A flash of movement to starboard caught my eye. I glanced over but saw nothing except rippling blue. Probably just a large fish, or maybe the dolphins were back. Still, a hint of unease surfaced. I scanned the horizon, the sky, the radar. Nothing unusual. Then the boat lurched. Not a gentle roll, but a sudden dip. I stepped back, trying to maintain balance. Something massive passed beneath the hull, a dark, hulking shape. Whale? It had to be. A second later, the water exploded off the bow. My heart leapt into my throat. A whale, enormous, gray, ancient-looking, was rising, breaching in a slow, majestic arc. This happened so fast and yet in slow motion. The whale's body cleared the surface, towering above me, barnacles glinting in the sunlight. It was impossibly huge, like a submarine erupting from the deep. "Whoa!" I yelled, instinctively pulling back on the throttle, futile as that was. The whale's momentum was unstoppable. It came crashing down, tons and tons of flesh and bone and blubber, right onto the front third of my boat. The impact was deafening. Fiberglass screamed as it shattered. The deck seemed to lift and twist beneath my feet. I was airborne, flung sideways into the ocean. The water slammed into my face, salty and shockingly cold. A second later, I surfaced, sputtering. My boat, my beautiful boat, was upended. The bow smashed down, deck splintered. The whale vanished beneath churning foam, as if I'd dreamt it. I swam, gasping, trying to reach any floating debris. My heart hammered. Where was the boat? What was left of it? I spotted a fragment of hull and, a bit further off, my small surfboard floating amid scattered gear. I chose the board, paddling frantically toward it. I got an arm over it and tried to calm myself. The water around me was full of bits of fiberglass, seat cushions, broken planks, a floating half-open cooler with my sandwiches and some fruit bobbing sadly. The engine was gone, sunk, and the main structure of the boat had drifted away. There was no immediate sign of the whale. Oh God, I muttered. This was real. I needed to think straight. I was roughly 5 miles from Catalina, if my initial calculations were correct. I drifted out quite a ways, perhaps off the southwest side of the island. The closest safe haven would probably be Little Harbor or Shark Harbor on Catalina's backside. 5 miles by board. Under normal circumstances, that's a serious paddle, but not impossible. Fear gripped my chest, but I focused on survival. I took stock. I had my wetsuit on, fortunately. The water was chilly, but not lethal. The weather was good. The afternoon was coming on, though, and I knew I had maybe 4 or 5 hours of good daylight left. I needed to start paddling. I managed to snag one of the seat cushions drifting by. A little more buoyancy never hurt. The board I'd grabbed was my step-up board, about 7-0. Not ideal for paddling 5 miles, but better than nothing. I strapped it to my wrist with the leash. I didn't see any other vessels around. "Help!" I shouted, on the off chance someone was out there. The emptiness swallowed my voice. No one answered. I started paddling slowly, facing Catalina. I could make out the island's rugged cliffs in the distance, the green-brown ridges sloping sharply into the sea. The ocean between me and safety looked endless. 1 stroke, 2 strokes. Find a rhythm. I tried not to think about what might be lurking beneath me. After 15 minutes, my arms burned. I rested a moment, bobbing on the gentle swell. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a creeping dread. I turned my head and scanned the horizon behind me. That's when I saw it. A dorsal fin cutting the surface, maybe 50 yards back. My stomach dropped. A shark, a big one. The fin was tall, unmistakable. Great white, 14 feet, maybe more. My heart rate skyrocketed again. Keep calm, I told myself. Sharks sense erratic movements, panic. Don't splash, don't thrash, just paddle smoothly, steadily. I pressed my chest flat on the board and began paddling again, each stroke controlled and silent. The fin followed. Sometimes it dipped under, sometimes I lost sight of it, but it always came back, trailing me. I felt like prey. I'd heard stories of great whites following surfers for miles, curious or testing. I prayed that's all it was, curiosity. My mind raced. What are my options? Fight? Impossible. Outrun it? No chance. I had to remain calm, reduce my profile as prey. I kept paddling, refusing to look back too often, though I could feel its presence like a cold knife at my spine. Time stretched. Half an hour must have passed. The fin remained. Catalina looked closer, but still too far. I could see the distinctive shapes of Little Harbor and the adjacent Shark Harbor. Ironically named, I mused grimly. That was where I needed to land. The coastline still seemed distant, shimmering and mocking me. My arms were getting heavy. I forced myself to keep a steady pace, no splashing. Suddenly the fin closed in. I glanced back. Bad idea. The shark was no longer just following, it was approaching. A swirl of water behind me. My heart pounded in my ears. I realized I was shaking. I forced my body into rigid stillness. Breathe. It's testing you. Then a bump. The board's tail lifted slightly. I almost cried out but bit down on my lip. Another swirl as if it circled beneath. I tried to steady myself, hugging the board. The next moment was a blur. A dark shape lunged at the nose of my surfboard. I saw the white underbelly, the massive jaws, the teeth. The shark's head rose above the water for an instant, and I screamed, "No! No! No!" The sound of those jaws snapping shut was sickening. It bit cleanly into the nose of the board, crunching fiberglass and foam. I kicked and flailed instinctively, though I knew I should keep still. Somehow, it didn't grab me. The board jerked forward violently. The shark let go, leaving ragged tooth marks and a half moon of missing material. I was still alive. The board now shorter, its nose gone, taking on a bit of water, but still buoyant enough. I kicked lightly to regain balance. The shark disappeared again. I was sure it would return to finish me off. My breath came in ragged gasps. I tried to calm down, scanning the water, waiting. Time slowed to a crawl. The silence was broken only by my panicked breathing and the slight lap of the waves. Where was it? Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw shapes darting beneath the surface. Smaller, agile forms. Dolphins. A whole pod of them, maybe a dozen, slicing through the water toward me. I'd never been so happy to see dolphins in my entire life. They encircled me, chattering, leaping. I saw gray bodies flashing around, and I realized the shark had retreated. Dolphins have been known to deter sharks, even attack them to protect humans. It was like a miracle. Tears welled in my eyes. I laughed, a high, nervous laugh that echoed over the waves. "Thank you," I whispered, as if they could understand. The dolphins seemed to linger, corralling me, guiding me toward shore. After a few minutes, I noticed the dorsal fin of the shark reappear much farther away, but it kept its distance now. The dolphins escorted me for what felt like an hour, until the coast drew nearer. I paddled, fighting exhaustion. The afternoon sun had shifted. It was sliding toward the western sky. I had maybe 2 or 3 hours before sunset. My muscles cramped, my head throbbed. I tasted salt constantly, my lips chapped and stinging, but I had a chance now. The dolphins eventually peeled off as if their mission was done. My spirits sank when they left, but I understood. They'd done their part. The shoreline of Catalina's backside grew detailed. I could see the rocky cliffs, patches of kelp, and the distinct indentation of the small bays. I knew I was aiming for Little Harbor, but my paddling had drifted me slightly. Shark Harbor was just adjacent to Little Harbor, separated by a small bluff. Shark Harbor was smaller, often deserted, a rocky beach favored by a handful of surfers and kayakers in the summer months. Perhaps I could make landfall there. At this point, anywhere on the island would do, as long as I got out of the water. I pushed on, each paddle stroke agony. I tried to keep calm. I sang songs in my head, focused on my breathing. I didn't dare glance back anymore. Whether the shark still lurked behind was irrelevant. I just had to survive a little longer. The water shallowed. I could see the seafloor now, patches of sand, rocks, and swaying kelp fronds. The swell rolled in sets of gentle, waist-high waves. My board, half mangled, still floated. The bite marks on the nose were savage, a reminder of how close I'd come to death. As I approached, I recognized the rocky shore of Shark Harbor. I could almost smell the eucalyptus that lined the hills above. A new wave surged beneath me, pushing me closer to land. I paddled with the last of my strength, caught a feeble little wave, and let it carry me until I could feel the sand and gravel scraping at my fingertips. I crawled out of the water, dragging the ruined board behind me. I collapsed onto the wet sand, gasping. The sun was low now, 2 hours before sunset. My body was done. I closed my eyes and lay there, half in and half out of the gentle surf. When I looked up, I saw no one. Shark Harbor was quiet this time of year. Maybe some kayakers had passed through earlier, but now it seemed deserted. I had to find help. Little Harbor's campground and the presence of the harbor patrol were just over the small headland. If I could summon the strength to walk, I might find rescue. "Hey, anyone!" I shouted, my voice hoarse. Silence. I tried again, louder. My voice carried over the small cove, but no answer. I cursed under my breath and started limping across the beach. Shells crunched underfoot. I left a trail of wet footprints. My legs felt wobbly. At the far end of Shark Harbor, a small trail led up and over a rocky ridge to Little Harbor. I knew the harbor patrol sometimes kept a boat there, or at least a radio. If I got there, I might be safe. As I stumbled up the path, I heard an engine's faint hum. I paused, heart lifting. Maybe someone was out there. I hurried, ignoring the pain in my calves and shoulders. My stomach knotted with hunger and thirst. Cresting the ridge, I looked down into Little Harbor. The late afternoon light painted it in soft oranges and purples. Moored inside was a small harbor patrol skiff. Two figures in navy blue uniforms were tying something off at the dock. "Help!" I called, forcing as much volume as I could muster. They looked up. One of them waved, then immediately jumped into action, untying the skiff and steering it toward the shore. I slid down the path, nearly tripping. By the time I reached the water's edge at Little Harbor, the skiff was pulling in. A patrolman hopped out. Broad shoulders, a trimmed beard, sunglasses. "You all right, buddy?" he asked, grabbing my arm. "You look like hell." I nodded, tears of relief welling up. "Boat? Sank. Whale hit it. I've been paddling for hours. Shark attacked. I need help," I babbled, voice shaky and half incoherent. He exchanged a glance with the other patrolman, a younger guy with curly hair who stared at me wide-eyed. "We'll get you taken care of," the bearded one said. "Let's get you warmed up." They guided me into the skiff. I collapsed on a seat, hugging myself, teeth chattering now that the adrenaline was wearing off. The younger patrolman rummaged in a storage locker and produced a blanket and a bottle of water. "Here, drink slow," he advised. I nodded, grateful. As we motored toward a small dock, I tried to piece together a coherent story. I left Cat Harbor early this morning. I was heading to San Clemente for the swell. A whale. It breached onto my boat. I fell overboard. Lost everything. Had to paddle back here. I paused, swallowing hard. A great white shark followed me, took a bite of my board. The bearded patrolman raised an eyebrow. "A whale breaching onto your boat? That's rare. You're lucky to be alive." The younger one shook his head in disbelief. "Did you see any other boats out there?" I shook mine. Not a single one. We arrived at the dock. They helped me onto the pier and led me to a small shack that served as their station. Inside was a radio, a first aid kit, some charts tacked to the walls. The bearded patrolman started calling someone on the radio, reporting that they'd found me. I caught fragments. "Found a survivor. Claims whale collision, possibly shark encounter. Needs medical attention." While he talked, the younger patrolman handed me a towel and had me sit on a folding chair. He examined the board with the bite marks I'd dragged along. "Damn," he whispered, tracing the jagged indentations. "This is definitely from something huge." I cleared my throat. "Thank you. I thought I was going to die out there." The younger patrolman gave a sympathetic nod. "You're safe now, man. Catalina's got you covered." After a few minutes, the bearded officer turned off the radio and came closer. "We've got a boat coming from 2 harbors to pick you up. Medical staff on board. They'll be here in an hour or so. Just sit tight." "Thank you," I managed. I leaned back, the tension in my body easing for the first time since morning. The shack smelled of old wood and salt. On the wall, I noticed a photograph of a similar patrol skiff and 2 officers smiling, holding big fish. Another photo showed a whale breaching far off. Yet something about these men was odd. I couldn't pinpoint it. Maybe it was just my frazzled nerves. The younger patrolman stepped outside. I heard him moving around the dock, maybe tidying something up. The bearded one stayed with me, arms crossed, studying me. "You said you left Cat Harbor this morning. Odd. Nobody there recalls seeing you depart." His tone was casual, but it sent a chill through me. I frowned. "I moored there last night. I left at dawn. There might not have been anyone awake." "Could be," he said, shrugging. "Your name again?" I realized I'd never given it. "It's Dan Peterson." I forced a smile. "I wrote a note at the harbor master's shack. You can check." He nodded slowly. "We will." I sipped more water, trying to banish the uneasy feeling creeping back in. Outside, the sun inched lower. Soon it would kiss the horizon. I wanted nothing more than to lie down and sleep for a week. But something about the patrolman's demeanor felt off. He leaned forward slightly, as if evaluating me. "You're certain it was a whale?" he asked suddenly. I blinked. "Of course. It breached right onto my bow. My boat's likely on the bottom of the ocean now." He smiled thinly. Hmm. Why? I asked, voice shaking a bit. You don't believe me? The patrolman stared at me for a long moment. We've had reports of smugglers in these waters, Dan. People making up strange stories to avoid scrutiny. My heart fluttered. Smugglers? I'm no smuggler. I'm just a surfer who got unlucky. Outside, I saw the younger patrolman walk by the window. He caught my eye and looked away quickly. My gut twisted. What was happening? I stood, uneasy, holding the blanket around me. Look, I appreciate the rescue, but I need medical help. I swallowed a lot of salt water. I've got cuts and bruises. The bearded patrolman nodded sympathetically. Of course. He stepped aside, letting me move toward the door. We'll take you to a safer spot. We have a better medical kit and a cot in the back room. I hesitated. Back room? He opened the door for me. Outside, the younger patrolman stood by the skiff, arms folded. Beyond them, the harbor was quiet. No other boats, no campers, nothing. Just the wind picking up slightly, rustling the chaparral. I followed the bearded patrolman around the side of the shack, expecting to see another door, maybe a makeshift bunk area. Instead, I saw crates stacked against the back wall. A strong smell, like diesel and something else, hung in the air. I didn't see any medical supplies. I took a step back. The younger patrolman moved closer, blocking my retreat. The bearded one rolled up his sleeves. My heart pounded. What is this? I asked, voice cracking. You said you were harbor patrol. We are, the bearded man said calmly. Of a sort. He reached for a crate and lifted the lid. Inside, I glimpsed something metallic. Firearms? I stumbled backward, disbelief and panic flooding me. The younger one sighed. Your story might be true, surfer boy. Doesn't really matter. You came at a bad time. His voice had lost its earlier sympathy. I was trapped. Two men, armed, impersonating, or maybe they were, harbor patrol. Could they be corrupt? Running guns, drugs? I felt faint. I'd survived the whale, the shark, only to face this? I don't have anything, I stammered, raising my hands. I'm no threat. I just want to get back safely. The bearded one shrugged. We can't let you go blabbering about what you might have seen here. Officially, we're not even supposed to be on duty today. My mind raced. The radio call they made. Was it real? Maybe not. Had they contacted anyone? Or was it staged? Please, I said quietly. I haven't seen anything. I'm too tired, too exhausted to care what you do. I won't tell anyone. They exchanged a glance. The younger one picked up a length of rope from a crate and stepped toward me. Instinct made me turn and try to run, but my legs were rubbery. He tackled me easily, slamming me into the dirt. Pain shot through my shoulder. He flipped me over, pinned me. I struggled weakly. The bearded patrolman crouched down, face inches from mine. We'll keep you quiet until we're finished here. Then we'll figure out what to do with you. If you're lucky, we'll dump you somewhere along the coast when we're done. I groaned, tears of frustration and fear sliding down my cheeks. I couldn't believe this was happening. He stood up and motioned to the younger one. Tie him up. As the rope bit into my wrists, I thought of the whale's massive bulk, the shark's jaws, the dolphins who saved me. It seemed impossible I'd survived all that just to end up at the mercy of these men. They dragged me into a small storage shed behind the shack, pushing me onto a dusty floor. The smell of old nets and rusted equipment filled my nose. They closed the door, leaving me in darkness. I heard them talking outside, voices muffled, discussing their cargo. Guns, perhaps. Smuggled wildlife? I had no idea. My mind was a storm of panic. I had to think. There must be a way out. If they were planning to leave tonight, I might have a chance to slip away. But I was bound, exhausted, injured. Outside, a sudden commotion, footsteps running, something heavy dropping, a dull clang, then silence. I strained to listen. The door creaked open, light spilled in. The silhouette of someone stood there. My heart sank. Probably one of them, come to check on me. Psst! A whisper. A female voice? I squinted. A figure stepped in, crouching next to me. In the dim light, I saw a tan uniform, blonde hair pulled back under a cap. Another harbor patrol officer? She put a finger to her lips. I heard the commotion, she whispered. I'm from the 2 Harbors unit. We got suspicious when we couldn't reach these guys on official channels. Are you hurt? I nodded, mouth open, too surprised to speak. Quickly, she pulled out a knife and cut my bonds. Can you walk? I stood, shaky, but upright. Yes, I croaked. They said they'd... She nodded. I know. They've been smuggling weapons. We've been onto them for weeks. She took my arm and led me outside. Outside, the sun had almost set. 2 bodies lay on the ground, the men who'd captured me. They were alive, I thought, just unconscious, their hands zip-tied behind their backs. Another official harbor patrol boat was at the dock, and 2 more officers were securing the area. I nearly collapsed with relief. Thank you, I said, voice breaking. I thought... She smiled grimly. You're safe now. Let's get you some real medical attention. The other officers approached, one checking my injuries, another verifying the prisoner's ties. I sat down on a crate, trembling. I couldn't believe the turn of events. After all that had happened, I was saved. Truly saved this time. They gave me fresh water, a protein bar. The female officer who'd cut me loose put a hand on my shoulder. You're lucky we arrived. We picked up an odd transmission and decided to check. These 2 weren't who they claimed to be. I nodded, tears in my eyes. I can't thank you enough. Darkness fell swiftly. The harbor patrol's real boat had lights shining over the dock. I heard distant laughter from one of the officers, relief in their voices now that the culprits were caught. As I sat there, wrapped in a blanket, I finally felt safe. Tomorrow we'll head back to the front side, one officer said. You'll get proper care, and we'll sort out the paperwork. You'll have quite a story to tell. I shook my head in amazement. I just wanted to surf. My voice was weak, but I managed a shaky smile. The officer laughed kindly. Hours passed. I dozed, waking occasionally. The patrol officers were taking statements, securing the area. I felt a sense of finality and peace. Near midnight, I stepped outside the makeshift station to get some fresh air. The stars were brilliant overhead. The sea was a calm black mirror, gently reflecting starlight. I inhaled deeply. I couldn't help but think about the whale, the shark, the dolphins, all real, all life-threatening. Yet I made it. Behind me, the female officer approached again. Doing okay? I nodded, just trying to wrap my head around it all. She looked at me thoughtfully. It's been a hell of a day for you. I managed a weak laugh. You have no idea. I touched the ragged edge of my surfboard, which I'd kept close. The shark's bite marks were unmistakable. No hallucination there. She tilted her head. So, about your boat, she said softly. We're sending a team out tomorrow. We'll try to locate the wreck. We've had no other whale sightings in that area recently, though. I frowned. What do you mean? No reported whales breaching near that route, she said. And we checked with Cat Harbor's harbor master. He said he never saw a note from you, never saw your boat leaving. I opened my mouth, baffled. That's impossible. I was moored there. Had dinner at the little joint by the dock. Some old fisherman saw me. We even talked about the swell. She shrugged. We'll sort it out. Maybe he missed it. Maybe you anchored just outside and the note blew away. Her tone was kind, reassuring. I looked out at the dark ocean. Something was off. Why would she mention that now? I shook my head, decided it didn't matter. I was alive. The rest could be explained later. We stood there quietly for a moment. Then her radio crackled. She stepped away to answer it. I stared at the horizon line, where the faint outline of land blended into the night sky. That's when I noticed a faint glow far off, running lights from a boat. A familiar silhouette. My boat? No, that's impossible. Mine sank after the whale hit it. Didn't it? I narrowed my eyes. I knew the lines of my Ed Monk rough water designed by Hart. That shape out there, it looked eerily similar. Could I be delirious? The female officer returned. We're set for the night. We'll head out first thing in the morning. She followed my gaze. Something catching your eye? I pointed at the faint lights offshore. Do you see that boat? She squinted. Barely. Just some lights. Probably a fishing boat. I nodded slowly, but something gnawed at me. There was a detail I couldn't ignore. The rhythm of those lights. My boat's running lights had a quirk. One of the bulbs flickered in a steady pattern due to a loose connection. I saw the same flicker pattern now, distant, but unmistakable. My throat tightened. How could that be? My boat should be on the bottom after the whale's impact. Unless? Had it never sunk? Did I imagine the entire collision after I fell overboard? But how to explain the board's bite marks? I took a step forward. That's my boat, I said quietly, more to myself than to her. She gave me a puzzled look. Your boat? I didn't answer. The lights bobbed gently, then winked out as the boat moved behind a rocky outcrop. Gone. I shivered. The night air was suddenly colder. I thought of the whale, the shark, the dolphins, the fake patrolman, the real rescue. So many layers of danger, deception, and survival. Yet something was unresolved. In the distance, a single splash sounded, like a massive tail slapping the surface. I looked toward the sound, but saw nothing, just darkness and the distant hush of waves. The officer touched my arm. Come on inside, you're tired. In the morning, it'll all make more sense. I followed her, my mind spinning. Maybe I'd never left Catalina's waters. Maybe I'd never even reached the point where whales breach. Maybe the shark attack and the whale strike were real, but my boat hadn't sunk. Had I been delirious? Abandoned my boat in panic after a near collision? But then why had I been so far out? We stepped back into the lit shack. The rescued reality felt both comforting and suspicious. On the table lay my damaged surfboard, bearing undeniable tooth marks. I touched them, felt their sharp edges. Real. Undeniably real. As I settled down, another officer placed a hot cup of coffee in my hand. Grateful, I sipped. The bitterness grounded me. I'd survive this night. Answers could wait. Outside, in the darkness, the ocean kept its secrets. My boat, or a ghost of it, drifting silently. A whale out there, or maybe not. The shark's tooth marks etched in foam and fiberglass as proof of something wild and deadly. The officers chatted softly, confident they had resolved the immediate threat. I was safe, rescued, and that should have been the end of it. But as I closed my eyes, one final thought chilled me. I was at Shark Harbor, so close to Little Harbor on Catalina. But when I glimpsed a chart on the wall as they had tended to me, I noticed something odd. The coordinates marked on their operational map didn't match where I believed Shark Harbor should be. They showed a cove further offshore, closer to San Clemente Island, an area restricted by the Navy, known for no public moorings. The map pinned in the shack wasn't Catalina's backside after all. My mind reeled. Had I paddled in circles? Had the current carried me far south? Was I somewhere else entirely, in an off-limits zone where these officers had staged a rescue? I opened my eyes to find the female officer watching me closely. She smiled too warmly. I looked again at their uniforms. No official insignia I recognized. Too generic. My heart sank. I'd escaped the criminals, but who exactly had I fallen into the hands of now? As I started to question, the officer gently pressed my shoulder, guiding me toward a cot. Rest, she said softly. Everything is under control. I lay down, body shaking with a new fear. As I drifted toward uneasy sleep, I heard one of them whisper, "Welcome to San Clemente Island." I realized with a start, I never made it back to Catalina at all. What the hell?